Welcome, folks, to our continuing education event for tonight. We've got a guest, Alyssa Young, and a topic really dear to my heart on creating productive learning environments for all learners, for everybody who's in the room. So I'm going to stop talking. Alyssa's got a great program for us. I'm going to shut up and go to the background and let her take over.
All right, off we go. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for choosing to be here and spend the evening with us. I'm committing to your development as Avalanche educators. I am so grateful to AIARE for the invitation to speak on this topic, and I'm excited to be here learning alongside you all. Ron is here supporting the webinar, so thanks. He'll be helping with the tech things and available to you all via the chat should anything arise, so don't hesitate to reach out. I can't see you all as well as I would like to. So if you're like trying to get my attention and I'm not responding, go to Ron and he'll let me know. All right, with that, let's get going. So my name is Alyssa Young. I'm based now up in the Northwest. We live in Bellingham, and I work as an avalanche educator and a guide. I've been on both sides of the AIARE Professional Growth Network, first as a mentee in a really formative season, and have since gone on to be a mentor for the program, and now get to facilitate field days, which is a total season highlight for me. In my spare time, I'm a volunteer for Bellingham Mountain Rescue, and I am one of the founding members of Cascade Mountain Ascents. We're a worker-owned mountain guiding co-op up here in Washington. At the end of the day, I'm really just here because I love the mountains and sharing them with others, and feel very lucky to have made a career of doing so. I'm super interested in what we can learn about ourselves, the land, and community by thoughtfully engaging with it all. I also just think skiing's really fun, so that is in and of itself a huge part of why I am here. And my vulnerable little moment of the evening is that this is a totally new topic for me to present on. So thank you for being here and being part of my own learning process. I learned a ton in the process of putting this talk together, and it is my sincere hope that you find some valuable takeaways. And again, just thanks. Thanks for being along for the ride. So I'm going to let y'all know a little bit of what you can expect this evening. We are going to be talking about productive learning environments for all learners, and beginning with taking a look at who we are as avalanche workers, then going into talking about adult learners, understanding them a little more deeply. We're going to take a break in the middle and then really dig into those productive and learning environments, talking about what they are, why they're important, and we will conclude with an activity. And at the end, I'll leave you some resources for your own continued self-directed learning and some practical guidelines for educators. A little webinar etiquette. I don't know, the beginning of every avalanche education season, I have to remind myself about this Zoom thing. Norms for the night, please stay muted unless it's a time where we're looking for participation, and we'll unmute you. If you have your cameras on, that's pretty fun. Nice to feel a little bit like speaking into the void. So if that's available to you, you leave your camera on. You can drop your questions into the chat at any time. And you can also raise your hand. You could raise like this hand, but the little reacty thing. And then reactions. If something really resonates, you are welcome to use the little reaction feature, just a way to feel slightly more like humans interacting in real space in this odd format. And then just a note on participation. There will be opportunities for participation throughout the evening, and I request that we all really lean into the space and co-create this rich space for learning from each other. And I thank you in advance for your generosity, sharing your thoughts and feelings, your bravery, and your participation. And all that said, if that is like you are not feeling it or it's not going to work with your environment where you're at right now, that's totally fine. So I'll just assume that cameras off means that you are listening and getting engaged, but won't be actively participating. All right, little tech check. Ron, did anything come up in the chat that I should be aware of? Because I cannot see it.
No, I told everyone that I'd be monitoring the chat and filtering things toward you,
Cool.
and that if they really want to interact with you, voice by voice, that they should just use the raise hand function, and I'll just do all the funneling of that to you. And I'll give you a heads up.
Okay, cool. Yeah, interrupt me at any time.
Cool.
Let me know if anything goes weird with the Zoom. Otherwise, I'm just going to be like rolling along obliviously.
Will do.
Okay. All right, let us begin. So we will start by taking a moment to think about who we are as Avalanche professionals. It's a pretty big and complex job. We do a lot of different things, and it requires a huge breadth of skill. I pulled this figure from a paper entitled On the Gender Landscape of the Avalanche Safety Industry um, by Andrea Manberg, Maria Johansson, and Eva Latasua. And they did a really great job defining what it means to be an avalanche educator or an avalanche professional. In their research, they asked a broad pool of avalanche workers to define what it is that this job takes, and those outcomes are reflected here. So this is what the community has collectively decided you need to do this job. Starting at the top there, we have social skills, emotional skills, field-specific skills, general cognitive skills, and dedication. Like this, it's kind of full on. Or at least I feel it is. And it pulls on a lot of different parts of us as people. So I just want to take a moment to begin by acknowledging the complexity of this work. And at the core, no matter how we're engaging with the industry, whether it's educators, snow safety directors, forecasters, whatever, we're risk managers. So as avalanche professionals, we're managing risk in the field. And as avalanche educators, it's our job to do this super meta risk management where we're equipping recreationalists with tools for developing their own risk management process, all the while facilitating safe and meaningful learning experiences in the field. In short, we have our hands full. And in order to do our job well, we need productive learning environments. Before we can create a productive learning environment, we need to think about who is showing up for them. Who are those spaces for? And we can build this understanding by looking through the lens of andragogy. So andragogy is the method and practice of teaching adult learners compared to pedagogy, which is all about child education. And this was popularized in the 1970s by Dr. Malcolm Knowles. The word had been around since the 1800s, but the 70s is really when Knowles brought it to the front. And this was a super pivotal moment when we started understanding and describing the vast difference between childhood and adult education. I really love this quote that, quote, adult learning is natural, just like breathing, in the way that it's an internal process totally controlled by the learner. In this view, the learner is the real center of education. Thus, adult educators should not really teach, instead, they should facilitate learning. And I really feel that and relate to that both as an adult learner myself and as an adult educator. So Knowles helps us understand adult learners and through these four basic principles. The four principles are really an answer to the question of what do adult learners want? and begins with involvement. So adults need to be involved in planning and evaluating their own education. They're primarily going to learn from experience, including mistakes. And adults are most interested in learning subjects that have immediate relevance to their life, whether that's personal life, recreation, their job. The people want relevance. And then kind of related to that is that it's really problem-centered. Most adult learners approach their education from a very problem-oriented mindset rather than a strictly content-oriented mindset. And kind of sounds like avalanche education, right? So these 4 principles underlie adult learning and help us understand it a little bit more fully. And the next question to ask is, so we know like generally what adults are looking for where they're showing up to learn, but who are they and how can we best reach them? And for this, keep going with Dr. Knoll's work and check out the 6 assumptions of adult learners. So this answers the question of what are people bringing up with? What are these adults walking into our classrooms showing up with? And how is it going to inform their experience as learners? So it begins with needing to know. So adults need to understand the reason and the relevance of their education and what is in it for them. And they also have a really strong self-concept. Adult learners tend to be self-directed, independent, and want to manage their own learning or want to learn how to manage their own learning. Like it is a learning curve, figuring out how to be an adult learner. We all bring a lot of experience. So people have a huge breadth of lived experience to draw on and apply to their learning. With this, people have ingrained ideas, diverse backgrounds, individualized approaches to problem solving, critical reasoning, reflection. And of course, there's pros and cons to all this. Some of us have really rock solid and helpful habits. Others of us, or we all have both, but there are things that we could stand to grow and to learn with, right? Next, we have readiness. So adults want to learn things that are relevant. As we talked about, often goal-focused and really want to see progress. A big part of what is needed is a clear why and a what for contextualizing learning goals. And then orientation. Adults tend to be more engaged by learning that is very immediately problem-centered and practical. They want tangible outcomes that can be applied in real life. They want to be involved in planning and have a real hand in their own educational trajectory. And will focus most on the aspects of learning that seem useful and applicable. And sometimes we need to convince people that things are, in fact, useful and applicable so that they get the attention that they need. The final piece here is motivation, which is really key. Adult learners tend to be intrinsically motivated by a huge range of value drivers, whether that's skill acquisition, something that contributes to self-esteem, personal growth, skill that's going to contribute to your job, things to improve quality of life. We all bring our own motivators to learning spaces. Okay, that was a lot. So these principles and assumptions have been super useful to me for understanding what I'm working with as an adult educator, but have also led me to some really valuable reflection on who I am as an adult learner. I find that sometimes looking at big picture, really generalized theory can help me step outside of myself and my immediate experience and view it from a different perspective. And that's been a really important part of my own learning. So I'll share some more info on this in the document at the end, and I encourage you all to dig into it and use it to guide your own reflection and build your understanding of some adult learning theory. All right, but it don't stop there. So we can also add depth to our understanding of our students and, of course, ourselves by considering this idea of intersectional heuristics. So you all, or I'm sure many of you may be familiar with Ian McCammon's heuristic traps and the acronym FACETS, which is a super useful teaching tool in avalanche education world. And Aidan Goldie Ahumada has done some really cool work to build upon, and also to critique McCammon's work, basically asserting that while this is a really solid foundation for how we approach human factors, there's a big missing piece. And that piece is intersectional heuristics. So heuristics, we just define as a decision-making shortcut. It can be really helpful, helps us get through our life, put our shoes on without like thinking about every single step of the process, right? But can also be harmful when it becomes a shortcut. That's the trap piece. So the intersectional heuristic is a decision-making shortcut that's driven by unbalanced social power structures. And research shows that this dynamic makes certain groups vulnerable to unconscious, or though hopefully not, could be conscious, identity bias. So Aidan says that defining and accounting for intersectional heuristics helps prevent us from overlooking the nuance of social interactions that tie in to all of our other human factors. Make this so you can see it a little bit better. So this is a great figure that Aidan adapted from Sylvia Duckworth's Wheel of Power and Privilege, and it is really useful for visually describing the relationship between identity and marginalization. Basically, like, who are you? Who are you? Just who are you? And then what does the world do with it? And I love this because it helps us visualize where we are located in proximity to power based upon who we are. And it's super critical that we understand that these things are driven by really, really big social systems that are so much larger than any of us as individuals. The point here is not to make anybody at fault because of their identity, who they are, what circumstance they were born into. Like, we are who we are, right? But we need to bring in an awareness of how these big social forces are acting upon us, and then how that impacts how we show up in different dynamics. So whether you are in line at the grocery store or applying for a job or heading out for a ski tour, these big factors are always at play. And like most things, by increasing our awareness, we can do a lot to change how we're engaging with them. So I'll stop talking for just a second and give y'all a moment to just digest and think about where you locate yourself within this wheel. All right. Gonna keep on rolling. And again, I'll share this resource with y'all. So Aidan's work builds upon the thinking of brilliant scholar and lawyer Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectional in 1989. And Crenshaw did this in an effort to describe how different identities, namely race, class, and gender, though there are a lot more, how our identities impact how individuals are treated within community structures. So we're looking at how really, really big things, bigger than any of us as individuals, play out on the individual scale. So basically, it describes how our social and political identities result in these really unique experiences, both of discrimination and of privilege and proximity to power. And I think it's really important to talk about this not all just through the lens of what sets you up to be marginalized, but also what sets you up to be in a position of power. I see quite often the conversation just focusing in one direction. So I pulled the dictionary definition here. So there's a whole lot more written on the topic, but our basic dictionary definition is that intersectionality is the complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination combine, overlap, and intersect, especially in the experience of marginalized individuals or groups. So again, it really focuses on how this relates to marginalization, but I think it gets the point across. And again, the point here is not to demonize anyone. That's unproductive. Happened plenty. And Crenshaw responds, I think, quite gracefully, but to critiques by saying that the point of intersectionality is to provide, quote, a prism for seeing the ways in which various forms of inequality often operate together. Ultimately, the outcome of that is like the sum is, what's the same? Greater than the sum of its parts. The impact is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that regardless of who we are, we can relate to this in one way or another. So why is it relevant here? You may be asking this question. I bring up this really big topic because we exist within community. The backcountry touring community, the avalanche industry, is a community in its own right, where all these dynamics are present and playing out all the time. And since we by default live within these big interlocking systems of power, we're very, very impacted by them. And the 2020 Avalanche Professionals Census shows that the backcountry community and the avalanche industry have an overall, like statistically, the community structure is dominated by white, middle-aged, and cisgendered males. And Aiden writes, I think quite articulately that despite the good faith intentions of individuals within this community, the current structure of the community leads to a vulnerability to intersectional heuristics. So Aiden is suggesting that intersectional heuristics are a missing heuristic trap that we need to be teaching to. And because they make groups vulnerable to unconscious bias. And it makes it so those with more marginalized identities, those who are living like on the outside of the wheel or some part of their identity is pulling them away from that proximity to power, it makes those folks more vulnerable or more exposed to having their input undervalued by their groups. And again, this could be conscious, it can be unconscious, it can play out in so many different ways. And so I present this tool or this concept and propose that it needs to be weighed equally alongside the rest of the facets and really brought into our conversation around human factors, both within groups of professionals, like in spaces like this, and also into our classrooms as avalanche educators. It feels like this starts to round out a piece of the puzzle or like round things out and can improve our efficacy as educators. So my hope is that this is a useful beginning of a conversation on this topic that ultimately will just contribute to individual and community safety and help to make us better educators. So what do we do with it? This question I pulled from Aiden's article. Aiden suggested how can I ensure that everyone feels comfortable enough to share their opinion and apprehension about interacting with avalanche terrain? This is a pretty like fundamental question that we probably think about in our groups, but when we view it through the lens and we weigh intersectional heuristics, it becomes a really big, full question and kind of a hard one to answer to. So I think this is really essential that we reflect on deeply and is a question that we can really respond to every day that we show up to work, to teach, or to go touring. We can respond to this question in how we choose to engage in community. All right, let's take a break. Let's let all of that settle. If it's helpful for your learning, take some reflective notes, get your needs met, grab a tea, and let's come back in 5 minutes, which is half past the hour.
Yes. We'll see you then.
Great.
Hey, welcome back.
Hello. Welcome, welcome. All right, hope folks are returning.
Looks like it. Yes, we're all here.
All right, great. we continue. So, having taken a deeper look at ourselves as Avalanche professionals and our students as adult learners, and then, of course, all of us as people with complex and layered identities, we can get into a more productive and informed conversation about creating productive learning environments. What y'all are here for. As we head into this, I do want to acknowledge that those previous three topics, each in and of themselves, could have been an entire webinar. They could be like a whole dissertation. And I really just cranked through it all. And the purpose here is, well, one, I'm not an expert on any of these things. I just find them to be really interesting. So the purpose is to share some different ways of thinking and to share some cool research that's been done, and just put it on your radar so that you can continue like pulling the uh, pulling the ball of string apart, um, and yeah, continue on your own journey with that. So there's my small way of feeling slightly better about just rocketing through a bunch of like incredible work that really can't be summed up in the first part of a webinar. Okay, so productive learning environments. Productive learning environments must be inclusive in nature and responsive to a diversity of learners in order to be effective. Um, you all know that there is a massive range of people that are showing up for that are pursuing Avalanche education. Um, and we get to deal with all this in a really, really specific and unique environment. Um, that yeah, just adds to the delight and the complexity of it all. So as we dive into this, just wanted to get on the same page about some language. So I've pulled these definitions from Avalanche Canada's DEI Committee Appendix on Shared Language. I know that the words diversity, equity, and inclusion get thrown around a lot. The acronym DEI gets thrown around a lot, especially these days. But it's really important. I feel like sometimes as soon as something becomes an acronym, it's like it's gone. Um, so I want to just like right now break it down into the actual words and the actual things that we're trying to communicate with these words. So, diversity for us tonight here refers to the variety of personal experiences, values, and worldviews that arise from differences of culture and circumstance. Such differences include race, ethnicity, gender, age, religion, disability status, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, geographic region, and more. These are the slices of the pie in the previous figure. Equity refers to actively working to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented full participation across differences in culture and circumstance. Specifically, redressing the exclusion of historically underrepresented groups. So attention to equity involves ensuring access, opportunity, and advancement for all people in every stage of education and career development. I would say life. Their definition references education and career development. And then last but not least, we have inclusion. And inclusion refers to the act of creating environments in which individuals and groups feel welcomed, respected, supported, and valued. And this is done by eliminating the practices and behaviors that serve to marginalize. So an inclusive climate embraces difference, offers respect in both words and actions so that all people can participate fully in opportunities. I would say it's a pretty good baseline goal and approach to have in our educational environments. And why is it important? Well, on a baseline, deeply intuitive human level, we know that it feels good to be respected, and it feels good to be included and allowed opportunity regardless of who we are in our circumstance. Um, but I also bring it in here because inclusion is the foundation of really good risk management. And it is our job as avalanche educators to manage a whole heap of hazards. Let us recall from the beginning that as avalanche professionals, it's our job to be risk managers in the field. And then as avalanche educators, it's our job to equip recreationalists or developing professionals with tools for developing their own risk management process. And we're responding to a lot of different hazards. We're dealing with environmental hazards. People are taking social risks. We're exposed to psychological hazards. There's a big financial risk taken when you invest in all of this, either as a recreationalist or a professional, I would say. And more. So we need to have a very well-rounded and multifaceted approach to our risk management. So the cool thing is that research shows that inclusion measurably improves decision making, communication, and group performance, especially in hazardous environments. That's what we want. This is where the goods come out. So let's dive into some of the ways this shows up. We know that when there are more voices being shared, we collectively within our groups have fewer blind spots. Groups with diverse perspectives identify more hazards, question assumptions, and catch errors earlier. When learners are feeling welcome and respected, they contribute observations that are going to directly improve decision making. We also know and could probably, I personally can relate to this one, that a felt sense of psychological safety strengthens decision making. When we feel safe within our groups socially, more likely to speak up about concerns and know that that's not going to have some sort of a negative social repercussion. And as educators, skillful and inclusive facilitation can address and reduce a lack of social safety that might start to show up in our classrooms, which it's just going to happen. We work with people. We are people working with people. And with a skillful approach, we can mitigate these power imbalances that are going to show up. And in our context, this helps us address a lot of the issues that are really core to human factors that are, as we know, present in many avalanche accidents and involvements. Next, we see that authentic inclusion improves communication, especially under stress. So teams that practice and build a really solid foundation of inclusive and effective communication in an educational setting or a training setting, and then put it to play on the day-to-day, are going to be able to rely on that when the heat gets turned up and when things get stressful, when we find ourselves in those more consequential moments. And this can look like being able to fall into clearer roles within groups, have more higher quality check-ins. That doesn't just mean longer, but like effective, efficient check-ins, and more robust and collaborative decisions being made. We also see across this industry and others that representation improves learning and retention. When participants are showing up and seeing educators or instructors who look like them and share similar life experiences, confidence often increases. People let their guard down, questions flow more freely. And this can lead to way better educational outcomes. So stronger engagement leads to stronger field performance, and valuable takeaways. And I'll say that this is not a one-way street. It's also pretty special to see people of identities that you relate to, showing up, welcoming them into learning spaces that you're cultivating, especially for those of us who really developed and were students in spaces where we usually like the only fill in the blank, the only woman, the only adaptive skier, the only person of color, whatever it is. It's a really big dynamic shift when that isn't the case. And the retention piece then is also like keeping people engaged in their learning. If you're showing up and having more positive, not to say that like, I don't want to like, yeah, not to say that just showing up and being in a classroom with somebody that shares your identity is going to like mitigate every potential hazard of imperfect education. But I do think that when we stack those positive experiences, people are going to show up and continue to invest in their education. And professional retention is also a thing in more diverse workspaces. And then our last point here, and this of course is not, these are not the only ways that inclusion underlie solid risk management. Just some of the things that I have found to be true. The last thing is just that reducing barriers is going to increase the pool of backcountry users. This can look like the availability of affinity courses, scholarships, just different sorts of accessible course design that are bringing people in who otherwise would not be pursuing or able to access education, and people's identities who have historically been excluded from this space. And that is both really important on the individual level and for the community, because a broader and more diverse user base strengthens the community on the whole. And we all benefit from it. Okay, so let us take a moment to step into our students' shoes. We're going to do an activity. We have talked about our roles as educators, about identity, about productive learning spaces, about so many things. And with all of that in mind and these new frameworks and these new tools for thinking, let's turn our attention to how it actually feels to be in different types of learning environments. So I personally don't think that we can address imperfect situations or come up with tools to fix things until we can really feel them deeply and be empathetic to the experiences of others. So we are going to use our imaginations to travel through some different learning environments from the perspective of a student, an adult learner participant. And then we are going to consider it from the other side as educators. And we'll begin with the hard one. So settle in for this brief reflective exercise. You can close your eyes if you'd like, or gently cast them down, and don't worry, you will not be asked to share this time. So let us begin by imagining we are adult learners stepping into a new educational environment, and it's just not good. What does it feel like to step into an unproductive learning environment? We're going to take just a couple minutes on this one. So imagine walking into a course or a classroom where you, on the baseline, you are just nervous. You don't feel welcome. You're stressed out. Maybe you like didn't have the information that you needed to arrive feeling prepared. So there's a bunch of uncertainty. As you imagine this like dreadful situation, what physical feelings come up for you? What negative thoughts start to cycle? Some of us may have recent experiences with imperfect learning environments to draw upon. Others, I hope the most of you have to come up with something totally fictional, but really dwell in that feeling of being in that unproductive learning environment and consider your thoughts, the physical sensations, Maybe some of the specifics of what is going on around you makes it feel unproductive. We'll give it another 30 seconds of reflection. And if you want to jot down some notes, some takeaways, you may. All right. A brutally long 30 seconds, though I do promise I was watching the timer. All right, so you've been jarred out of your imperfect learning environment. Shake it off. None of that was real. Um, give yourself a little wiggle. Observe, regard the feelings that you just had. And, many of them, the ones, particularly ones that may feel challenging or hard because they're real and like been there, done that, relating to past self, that was rough. But in this case, we can shake it off. And now we're going to go into a more productive feeling space. All right, here's some more comfy, good feeling terrain. So now having been on like the not so hot end of the spectrum, let's go complete opposite direction. And you will have an opportunity to share with this one. So what does it feel like when you participate in a really productive learning environment? Imagine opening a classroom door, walking up to a group at a trailhead. Maybe you're showing up for the first day of a guides course, or you're rolling into your area ITC, stepping into a college class, like something you are so excited about. As you walk into that space, how are you greeted? By your instructor, by classmates? What is the body language of the people around you? How is your body language? In this imaginary scenario, your instructor recognizes you and introduces you to a classmate. How do they do so? Tune into what sort of communication would be going on around you in the super productive environment, how your instructor is speaking to people, what tone of voice you are speaking with, what the environment is like. And take a moment to just settle. And this one, we're going to give 1 whole minute of reflecting, thinking, and try to summarize your experience of this positive learning environment, either into a sentence or a couple of bullet points. And there's a few prompts there. Okay, 1 minute starting now. All right. We'll bring it in. And now I would love to hear from you all about some of your reflections. So we're going to have 2 different modes of engagement. God willing, if I can do this webinar thing. One mode, which maybe we'll take a second for, is just drop it in the chat. You can make yourself, I think you can make yourself anonymous. I don't know. Yeah, drop your reflection in the chat. Or you can raise your hand and Ron will do tech magic and we'll get to see your face.
Um, Kelly responds in the chat that she notices that in a productive learning environment, she can ask questions.
Mm, real. Yeah, being in those spaces where like because we're safe, we're using the front part. I'm not like I know there's like probably neuroscientists in the room, so sorry, no disrespect your profession, but as I understand it, when we feel safe, we use this part of our brain and it helps us be curious versus when we're freaked out and threatened, we use this part of our brain and it turns us into a like little animal running away and hiding under a rock. So yeah, asking questions, great indicator of social safety.
Ghost says that they want to be part of the group and share insights and questions. Mark says it's not what's present necessarily, but what's not present, what's
Mm.
missing, the lack of cynicism, the lack of negativity. That's one indicator for Mark.
Yeah, that like collective, the vibe created by the whole cohort. We can like catch on to each other's goodness.
Yeah.
What else we got?
Ken says where an instructor demonstrates a genuine interest in all the students. Tara says, I want to continue to learn, return, and feel energized.
Yeah, the fun parts.
Yeah. Eric says, for me, the productive learning environment looks like people talking to each other, getting to know them, including instructors, regardless of background or who I know in the industry or the room. People are talking uh, during the in-between spaces instead of scrolling phones, and loud voices are making room for other people to speak. A lot from Eric there.
Yeah. I love that. It reminds me of the like the andragogy model where it's like the wheel of participation and learning is flowing between participants as well as facilitator. Rockin'.
Jason says, energetic, welcoming, and open, a space where people can share opinions freely and have them received in a genuine spirit of learning. And Alex says, encouraging of everyone to have a voice, not just having the space for it.
Totally.
And I'll share mine here.
Yeah.
What I feel like I thought of this scene in Patch Adams where his antagonist Mitch is so frustrated with him because Mitch reads and reads and reads to learn, and he figures that Patch is cheating. But because Patch is just sort of passionately and intellectually released, he can just learn faster. That's how I feel when the environment's right. I feel more like Patch Adams.
Love that.
I can learn circles around Mitch because I'm in, you know?
Love that. Yeah, we all have like our own ways of leaning in and showing up, right? Well, thanks so much for your contributions in the chat. Does anybody want to speak with their human face on a screen? If not, it's totally fine. Okay, then we'll keep on trucking. All right, and if you're somebody who is being really like thoughtful and attentive and listening deeply to the contributions of the other folks here, and you would still like to share, I invite you to still share your reflections in the chat throughout because mostly it'd be really fun for me to read them at the end. So thanks. So what I see here as kind of scrolling through these your contributions is that there's some through lines, right? Some themes that I see are interest, both between flowing freely between instructors and students, between participants, a general sense of positivity, a spaciousness where contribution and questions can arise easily. And part of that being because there's not these negative factors, the cynicism, the negativity. Which I will say, sometimes students can really set a negative tone, but I will say that instructors have an awfully powerful, can have a very powerful input when it comes to bringing a tone of negativity or burnout or mid-season sogginess or whatever it is. Yeah, so thinking about how the influence flows in all directions, both from instructors to students, students to each other, and then from students back to us instructors. Well, the other thing that stood out to me that I really love about this is that everybody has a pretty different experience. We all prioritized describing different takeaways from a positive and a learning environment. And to me, this piece is really essential because it builds a lot of empathy and understanding. Um, I don't know exactly what was going on in your heads as you visualized this positive or this productive learning environment, what the specifics looked like. But I would imagine they were all pretty different. And I think that this is super important for us to keep top of mind as educators because we need to have a lot of different tools to draw upon for creating productive educational spaces that are responsive to a huge variety of students. And we have so much to learn, right? Through conversation with each other. Like I just learned a lot from you all, and I really appreciate the opportunity for that. And then also through these moments of internal reflection. I think one of the great gifts of being an adult educator is that you're you're also an adult learner. And so if you can toggle back and forth between those different positions or mindsets, we can just learn a lot from ourselves about reflecting kindly and critically on our own experiences. Okay, so now that we've gone really, really big in theory and imagined scenarios, let's bring it back down to the tangible and share some resources on what we can actually do to create these productive learning environments. So I think one, and the reason that I started with it all is like go grapple with the big, messy, theoretical, existential stuff. Do that. Lots of time on the skin track for thinking. And it's super important, adds a lot of meaning to how we relate to ourselves and each other. But also if we stay in like the theory cloud, sometimes it doesn't feel ultra productive. So I want to bring it back down and ground things in the tangible, talk really about what is it we can do in practice here. So I'm going to provide some guidelines. These are not rules. I don't have a framework. These are simply some more tools to add to your toolkit. There's not going to be a one size fits all approach to creating productive learning environments. And that's just the truth. And it's kind of what makes being an educator really cool. Like life is dynamic, our environment is dynamic. We get to keep learning from it. But it can also be really overwhelming sometimes. So having some guidelines can be really useful. So here is a list of guidelines that I have compiled from both research and from some personal experience. And a lot of this might seem really obvious, but when we engage with it really fully and through the lens of adult learning, intersectional identity, and productive learning environments, I think each of these things can become quite powerful and substantial and carry a lot of weight. So we're going to go through this in a kind of chronological manner. Here's some things you can do before a course even begins, before your first interaction with your students. And some of these things really fall on the individual as an instructor, and other are a bit more operational. But all things to consider. So first, setting really clear pre-course, providing clear pre-course information that sets expectations and allows students to arrive feeling informed and supported. We need to be fair. Let people know what is expected of them, let people know what to expect of us, and then be consistent with it. I think that it's nice and can be effective to start a course with a more personal and a kind of humanizing intro, whether that's a quick email to the group noting, I don't know, something you're excited about or what color jacket you're going to be wearing so they can find you, or a note about the weather and how you're going to prepare to stay warm when it's blasty cold or something. There's something that makes you human to learners. Perhaps in anticipation of folks kind of buying into this like educational hierarchy or doing that whole expert halo thing. Just make yourself a human. Share some vulnerability. Find that in the pre-course setting, language is really important and can set the tone. So this is not terribly complicated. Doing things like using gender-neutral language, inclusive language in emails, course descriptions, curriculum, is really key. And there's small ways that as instructors we can chip away at this and improve our practice, both on our own and as we, tune PowerPoints and all that. And then this next one's a little bit more bigger picture operational, not always within the hands of instructors, but doing what we can to address barriers that may be preventing people from participating fully or at all in our educational opportunities. So whether that is a lack of access to safe transportation, making sure people are adequately informed about, about road conditions, if maybe facilitating, finding ways within the group to facilitate safe transportation for folks so that you can remove that like one piece of stress from their experience, right? Helping participants get access to appropriate equipment, appropriate clothing. Yeah, as a professional, like as somebody who does this all the time and like chooses and enjoys spending time outside, I feel like I'm still always honing the systems. And if I showed up on, I just reflect back to like a lot of the kit that I started out with and how much just like the base function of existing was like pulling from my bandwidth. Yeah, I think the beginning of my education and all this could have gone a lot differently without that stress. So seeing if there's anything that you or your organization can do to help folks get appropriate equipment, mitigating financial barriers, through reducing program costs, things like that. All of that is just going to affect who is able to show up on a program and how they're able to show up on day one. And there's so much more, but we'll start there. And then we arrive on our course. So it's important that we're being thoughtful about our body language. What is our eye contact like? Are we facing people with our whole bodies as we greet them? Do you just kind of let all your students swarm around you and wait expectantly until like the clock hits whatever time you're supposed to meet and like then you say hi? Or do you like greet people with eye contact and a hello and a handshake when they walk up? What's your posture like? I find this can be really hard when the conditions, like the environment, makes me want to kind of hunker. But just something to be mindful of is how is our body language impacting our students? And then also just language, our communication. A big one in this field of work is avoiding jargon until it's defined. And I would say beyond that, just being really thoughtful about jargon on the whole. So often we use really specific and technical language when plain language would work just fine. And for our students and where they're at may actually be more accurate. Um, so being thoughtful and precise about language and when it comes to the recreational avalanche education world, thinking critically about the difference between appropriate professional language for communicating what we're observing and what we're noticing versus appropriate recreational language or language for recreationalists. Just a thought. As educators, we can also provide multiple ways for folks to participate. So for example, in our activity, I provided the opportunity to drop something on the chat or unmute and speak. So different ways for folks to engage and participate, and then different ways to elicit that participation. So some people really might need like the one-on-one where you walk up to them and ask a personal question about exactly what they're doing to demonstrate that you're invested in their learning in order to get the questions flowing. Other folks might be totally happy to like popcorn style throw answers out in a group discussion or raise a hand, participate in these ways. The really quiet folks, who often are those that I learn the most from when I find an opportunity to connect. I just really value the opportunity to walk beside somebody on the skin track and see what conversations arise. Um, and I know that we all also have our own preferences and how we interact. And so as educators, we're asking ourselves to stretch and to try on different things that may not come naturally to access our students. So like let's give ourselves some credit for the fact that sometimes we're going to be interacting in a way that's not super comfy for us, but we're not there for us. Some other considerations is just meeting people where they're at. With this one, I find that it's really useful to have an incredibly clear grasp of educational outcomes and make sure that's been communicated so that you can meet people where you're at, but then also hold the standard. And it is just a reality that sometimes people show up on a course that either is not what they are looking for or is not appropriate with them and appropriate for them. And I think that there are ways to compassionately hold those situations. It's not necessarily about anybody being wrong, but sometimes we can meet folks where they're at, and sometimes we can if where they're at is not appropriate for the environment they are in, we can help direct them towards a more appropriate learning environment. That or program, if that makes sense. And then just other thoughts, considering what values we're centering, if say you are like a old retired free rider super sender and some young like rippers show up on a program that could be really exciting and really relatable, and by all means like relate with students about the things that are like personally exciting to you. But what happens when we let that conversation take over the whole social dynamic? So being thoughtful about which values we're implicitly or explicitly putting on a pedestal and centering, and how that's going to affect the group on the whole. And then the last thing is just being attentive to physical safety. We teach in a really tough environment. And when people are up against environmental challenges or exertion, this can really erode our bandwidth, our ability to be fully present and engaged with their learning. So as educators, how can we help people stack the deck to show up as fully as possible? And then last but not least, we have the post-course setting or towards the end of a program. So um, I have found both as an educator and a student, it is really valuable to have space for a meaningful debrief at the end of a program. And as a student, I feel particularly cared for when next steps are highlighted and laid out for me. So as we discussed earlier, adult learners really enjoy that sense of autonomy and having a hand in their own education. And you can like knowing these things can be helpful because then you can like cater to them. So if you provide a group with meaningful opportunity for reflection and validating the experience that was just had, but then also next steps in a bunch of different sorts. Like, what are the self-directed things people can do? What formal educational opportunities are out there? Are you or are you not available as a continuing resource for folks? Sharing that sort of information can really feel like gold to walk away from a program with. In these debriefs, it can be useful to ask people open-ended questions to get the wheels turning and so folks can reflect and learn, but also so that we can learn from their experiences and inform our own development as educators. Like the debrief is not just for the students, it is for us as well. And then with that, kind of on the theme of providing multiple ways for people to engage, making opportunities for anonymous feedback. I think this is a really, really critical one, especially when we start to think about some of those social power structures at play. Like you might not have a student that's necessarily comfortable giving you direct feedback, especially critical feedback, but maybe they have something really valuable and informative to say. So providing an opportunity for anonymous feedback, and this should have been in the pre-course section, but I think that it's really key that as field educators, like the people that are working directly with students, I think it's important that they have access to somebody within our organization that isn't like, that's not you, to go to if you have a problem. So an example of how I handle that is rolling up in a field to my group in the field, or even including this in the email, saying, I'll be in the field with you. Course directors in this group over here. If anything comes up you're not comfortable talking to me about, here's contact for my supervisor or for the office. And we're just providing like many lanes of communication in that way. All right, where were we? Follow-up communication. If after a program you have the opportunity to send something in writing, that can be really valuable. Also gives different types of learners different ways to hold on to info. We've all totally been in the course close or the debrief when we're like completely saturated and just thinking about how we're already late to go pick up our dog or something. So building in some redundancy, providing information written can be really useful. And then last but not least, taking the time to debrief within our teaching teams, our work teams. This is where we take the time to learn and grow. I often say that the debrief is where we get to really metabolize our experiences and turn them into learning. And I feel like that is super true, not just for students, but for us as educators. All right. I have put all of those points into this one-page resource, the one on the looker's left, which I welcome you all to download, edit it, make it your own, build upon it, completely redo it, and then send it back to me, please. I love it. So you can access those practical guidelines through the QR code. And if you're really excited about creating like resources like this, I would love to chat because I did this by myself and it would be way more fun to be engaged with other people. And then on the right, those are a lot of the resources that I referred to throughout this whole presentation. So there's so much out there. I decided the stuff that I use directly. There's some videos, there's some articles. I invite you to dig in and then bring this stuff to the Skin Track, chat about in your workplace with your friends, follow your curiosity, see where it takes you. We each have unique styles and ways that we bring this all to life when we're out in the field, and I'm so curious to get to learn from you all, and I would love to hear I'm just curious how this CE will become part of your own journey and development as an educator. So with that, please don't be a stranger. I hope this evening gave you some valuable tidbits to take forward into your season. And last slide. Again, just thank you. I appreciate being here in conversation with you all and your participation. the final two little morsels that I have. One is feedback. We love it. You can give feedback directly to AIARE through this cute little QR code, or to me via email. Reach out. I'd love it. There's my contact. I'd love to hear from any of you directly, or maybe run into you out on the snow. Um, Also, as I said, this is a new topic for me to speak on. So I'd love to continue honing this alongside other educators. So reach out, let me know how it landed. And I hope that everybody has a really wonderful season. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alyssa. And thanks everyone for attending. It's been another great one, another great banger for our CE season.
Okay, I'm gonna no, I'll leave the share thing. Y'all can hang out and ask questions if you want, and you could do the feedback right now so that you don't not do it. If you're like me.
I'll monitor in case anyone puts their hands up, and we'll just wait till everyone signs off.
Show. Bye, friends.
There's there's lots of thanks and applause in the chat, Alyssa.
Sweet, thanks. I did. I did find it. So fun. I love how varied the CE topics are this season.
Oh, thank you. I I did a bit of surveying on it, but I mostly just had 3 seasons worth of suggestions that we never got around to, and that's mostly what they were.
Awesome. Yeah, it turns out there's a lot. I feel
Yeah,
like everybody in attendance should be giving up. Like everybody has something to share that'd be so valuable. It's a cool thing about this work.
definitely. All right. Well, I think we're gonna call it an evening. I'm gonna turn the webinar off and that'll halt the
Fucking.
recording. Um, but yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alyssa, again. I'll follow up with you on how we get you paid, and thank you again.
Yeah, thanks so much. Have a good
Cheers.
one.
Good night, all.
Bye.